Well,
Because
it's an interesting conversation. It was a conversation that I was hoping would come up through this episode, but probably more in
mm,
later on in it, as there's a lot of talk from various fans, Chelsea fans, and other team supporters in the Premier League. At the moment, there's a lot of Chelsea fans that are complaining about Pochettino. They're done. They want him out. It started again, but it's happening on a bigger scale now. With that, you've got pundits from like Talksport and the other BBC and other media, newspapers, etc., just sort of saying that like his in-game management over the last two games has been horrific. He's not doing anything to change things when it was going against us against Liverpool, when it was going against us against Wolves. He doesn't know his best 11. Granted, you could argue we can't put out what I think our best 11 would be, because of injuries as a big one. And, some of them have come back, but they're not firing on all cylinders, which is to be expected. Um, where do you stand on this? Like, is it to do with the manager and I know we've had this conversation before, but is it to do with the manager, lack of tactics? There are talks about him changing the formation now to a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, which I actually was thinking about for the Liverpool final, the League Cup final, just because of how bad it went against us. I was like, actually, do you know what? Maybe having three centre backs on and two full backs with a five at the back would help us. I was going to say that for that episode, but as the conversations come up, the conversations come up. Is it the owners? Is it literally some of the fact that we haven't bought well? You know, and then also Chilwell's come out after the game, and he's been slated for this, saying that Wolves wanted it more. So why did we not want it more? Is it the players' responsibility to get themselves prepared and to get themselves ready and should be psyched up for it? Should some of that fall onto the management as well? There just seems to be so much kind of like controversy where people saying we've bought too many players. Are the players good enough? Half of them are injured. What is it? What is it? Or is it, a combination of all of it still? Um,
I
because
think
something's not right.
it's a combination of all of it. I mean, the whole season we've had 10 players injured or
Well,
not
eight.
available for whatever reason.
Every game, at least eight.
So it does limit your options massively. It's not like we're missing just a load of youngsters that we pad it out with. We have been missing Chilwell, Reece James, Fafana for the whole season.
I think it's a
Colwell's
big
now
miss.
out. Um, and even that's just our defence has been poor, and we're missing three sort of players that are supposed to be key to our defence going forward at all times. Midfield generally has been okay because we've Enzo's been injured a little bit, but the main three have kind of stayed fit, and then wingers have been sort of in and out and in and out, both of form and of injuries. So I think the big issue that we've and Nkunku's obviously not been there. Um, I think the big thing has been injuries for us, and I think that is fully placed the blame on the ownership because they got rid of all the medical staff. And that was a catastrophic mistake that made no sense at the time and still kind of makes no sense. I don't know what the medical situation is. I think they rehired a number of people, but we need specialist experts, the best in the game, really, because they've gone out and they've bought a load of players that now seem to be very injury prone or were always very injury prone. They're going to take a lot of managing to sort of keep them on the pitch. And part of me blames a lot of the in-game switches on that in terms of I think Poch has tried to make substitutions to change the game to the best that he can with the players that are available, but usually it's at half time. And I think he's got to keep in the back of his mind that Chilwell can only play 70 minutes. Gusto can only really be playing 75 minutes and make those subs later on I don't think in a game where he's got 11 men fully fit, he's bringing Alfie Gilchrist and Badashil on in that game.
Yeah, and on
I
that you've
think that's
got
purely just medical.
Nkuku, and Nkuku still can't play 90 minutes. Chukwuemeka, who I do think I can't wait for him to get fully fit.
Mm.
I feel like he's really going to bring something to the team when he's able to start a game fully and he's fully fit. So yeah, I do agree with that.
And I think on the transfer side, I think we've brought in a lot of players that are okay, but we've massively overpaid for them, and we've taken a risk on too many players. Um, I think I wanted Casado, but that was a ridiculous amount of money. It was always going to be a ridiculous amount of money. And when you think we can bring him in and potentially bring in someone to fill a gap with some experience somewhere as part of that, rather than spending 110 on Caicedo, or we just end up being in a position where we don't have to sell our youth academy prospects to try and recoup some of this funds. Bear in mind, we're not going to make it into the Champions League next season again. So there's probably another shit ton of talent that we've got to sell next year just to balance the books. I think some of the players that we bought, in theory, I think are good signings. I think, in theory, Lavia could be a good player for us when he's back fit, if he plays ever. In theory, Mudryk could come good at some point, but he's just not shown it yet. I think Noni's done all right when he's been fit, but he's an injury-prone one. Sterling was shite for the first season, but this season has sort of shown that there is a footballer still there. But I think we haven't bought a team to play with a specific style of football. Like if you watch Liverpool, you know how they're going to play every week. You know exactly what they're going to do, and part of that is Klopp's drilled it into them. A lot of the team's been together for a number of years, but they've got a brand new midfield, and part of it is they've gone out and they've bought players that work in the way that they want to play.
Fits their
Like,
style.
yeah, they've
It
gone out
fits
and
their
bought
style.
quick
Yeah.
wingers. They've gone out and bought strikers that can link play very well, but also score goals and be a threat. I mean,
Well, Pep and City have done the exact same thing. That's why they're the two best teams in the league.
yeah,
Yeah.
they've gone out, and I think from the documentary that Man City did, the Amazon one, it basically showed that Pep gave a list of 3 players and then went, get whichever one makes the most financial business sense. But I'm happy with any of these 3.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
clearly don't do anything like that. We're just going out and buying another young midfielder, another young midfielder, another young midfielder, and paying prices of what this player
Could be.
could be. Not anywhere near what they're worth at the minute. We're paying, if this player improves at a rate that you would expect a player to improve at, what they'll be worth then. Mudryk, with inflation, in theory, if he improves to that point, could be a 120 million player, depending on how many years left he's got in his contract, etc. But at the minute, he looks like a 20 million pound player that is going to go down to 5 million pound player very fucking quickly. And we spent 89 million on him. So I think a lot of it is the lack of experience that you've spoken about, and buying. I think we've bought something to make a project for 3 or 4 years and just assumed that buying young players would be okay now and we'd still be like there or thereabouts in the Champions League. And it hasn't worked. We needed significantly more experience than just Thiago Silva and the limited amount of experience that Chilwell and Reece James have had from the success that they've had while they've been at Chelsea. And I think it's incredibly problematic. I don't know who you get in to do the job at the minute. That one would take the job and 2 would get anything more out of this team, because again, we can't play long ball because we don't have anyone to kick the ball up to,
Agreed. No,
and we
100%.
don't create enough space. The wingers aren't in enough space that they can receive the ball like the Liverpool wingers. where they're like high and wide, and they're just can get in a position to receive the ball, especially when everyone plays a low block against us. We're also in a so we have to play it around the back and piss about with it, which causes us problems. And then it's individual mistakes, and I think it's more people not knowing when to pass the ball. I think we make a lot of stupid passes under very little pressure to someone that's under significantly more pressure, and I don't really understand what the fuck we're doing.
I don't think the team do either, because I mean some of the weights of passes, and I noticed this in the Liverpool game, but I didn't mention it, and I saw the same thing again in the Wolves game, where you're right, we're not passing the ball well, but I think that also comes down to a lack of movement. I haven't didn't see an awful lot of movement for Liverpool, and I definitely didn't see an awful lot of movement off the ball for Wolves. So actually, we're just attracting players to our static players, which is not good football. But even the weight of passes, where I don't know if it's the pass or whether it's the touch or both. But the amount of times that our first touch where we're trying to control the ball, it's bobbling up.
Mm.
They're then having to whilst they've got a player running onto them, they're then having to recover either a poor touch or a poor pass or both. So that for me, I noticed massively in that game. Going back to what you said about the manager, just quickly because you already mentioned it. Um, is there anything different that you think Poch could do at the moment? And if not, could you actually see? I mean, you kind of, excuse me, I mean, you kind of said it already, but just to clarify, because at the moment, Hansi Flick, I think that's who it was, the former German manager and former Bayern Munich manager, is being linked strongly again with us. And even people are saying bring back Mourinho, so he doesn't go back to United. Conte's available. People are saying bring him back. So we know that would be like if he did a five at the back. Is there anything different that we could do? Do you think maybe a five at the back is the way forward? And Poch could do that, or do we need a new manager?
Look, changing the formation obviously does change the dynamic of things. I think we're a little bit stuck with our team. I think the only way that you can kind of fit pretty much everyone in that we spent a lot of money on is a 5-3-2. We have a constant issue with centre backs at the best of times anyway. Maybe having three of them at the back would help things. I don't think Thiago Silva likes playing in a back five, even though him in the middle of a back five is significantly better for us. Because my main concern is a midfield two of Caicedo and Enzo. I don't think it works in the Prem on the basis that I don't think Enzo gets around the pitch enough. I
I
think
think
we'll
he's got
be
better at it, but I do agree with you. As a two, I don't think it
no,
works.
because they'll come up against a lot of threes, and it's just not quite enough.
Hmm.
So then you have to play Gallagher. You kind of have to play a three in midfield, which then means you've got two up front, which is going to be probably Jackson and Nkunku,
Yep.
which makes the most sense. And then you lose where we've actually been doing quite well is at times Sterling. It's been the wingers. The wingers have been the ones creating the chances. So you lose the only sort of real attacking output that we have, and we've got four wingers that then we go, well, we can't play them because they don't fit in the formation anymore because our defense isn't good enough.
I mean,
I
actually,
think
part of the reason that they're saying playing five will actually give Chilwell more license to go forward as well.
great, but he's not an out and out winger that's going to beat someone. He cuts inside.
Yeah.
I get it. It's not. He's not going to create an extra man. He's not going to be able to drive at people the way that Sterling's been driving at people and get a decent ball in the box. So I do think it limits us slightly. I mean, a different system gives a team something else to think about, and I think that's something that Tuchel did quite well when he came in was adjusting the system. We seemed to know what we were doing, and it seemed to work somehow. And the other team was sort of kept guessing because we had sort of varying different formations and things that when we got the ball, I think from my perspective, the only way I see it working is something that I saw in the Wolves game in the second half early on, was Caicedo dropping to the centre of the centre backs. The only problem with that is then you get Thiago Silva wide getting done by Pedro Neto, um, which is incredibly problematic. So I think that long term will be what the system ends up going to, is that the DM sort of drops back into a sort of centre back role. Then we end up with three centre backs. You've got left and right back high and wide, which was what they started doing that second half, which then allows the wingers effectively to take up the pockets of space that Cole Palmer likes to take up in between the midfield and
Yeah.
defence, and either pull someone towards them. I think that's the best that we're going to get with the current squad as we're doing it. Problem is Thiago Silva doesn't really fit into that, because that is when his pace just kind of gets exploited. And I think,
Yeah, and I think that's a long-term thing that they probably work towards, because all the clues coming out of the club and from Thiago himself would suggest that he will not be at the club next year or next season.
yeah, and I can see him dropping out towards the back end of the season if Cole gets fit. I could see him doing Cole Jazzy, assuming we've got a left and right back that fit. So yeah, I think that's the best we're going to get to. We don't, because otherwise we don't seem to be able to involve our striker in the game at all.